Hey everyone, it's Brian back at you with another video, and today we're going to go through a class action lawsuit against a brand called Armra. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that brand right. They sell a colostrum milk powder. So colostrum is like the mother's milk, the milk that the mother makes in her breast and the mammary glands that they feed to the newborns. It's like nutrient rich. There's a powder form of that in a lot of dietary supplements, and Armra sells that. That's their primary flagship product. They're in Amazon. They obviously sell on their website. I think they're primarily D2C. I don't really know how large they are. I don't know much about them. But this class action lawsuit is very interesting because there are some claims that you find in a lot of other supplement brands. And I think there's a big theme here in this particular class action lawsuit that I think a lot of other startups should be aware of. Now, to the person who sent me this class action lawsuit, thank you so much. There's so many people that I cross paths with on this channel. And this particular person, they have their own small startup brand. They launched not too long ago, a few months ago, doing fairly nicely. And they sent me this class action lawsuit. So let's get into the details. Now, if this is your first time here, my name is Brian. It's great to meet you. I've been in the supplement space for over 2 decades now, specializing in regulatory affairs and quality assurance, and I help supplement brands, startups, as well as established brands grow by navigating FDA and FTC requirements. And if you want to work with me personally, you can find the links in the description down below. All right, so here's Armra. You can see here that they do make a colostrum powder, and they have some interesting claims here. Strengthens your body's barrier to defend against everyday threats and enhance vitality. Let's see what else. They've got some immune system claims here. And I think these are, on the surface, they're fairly standard, right? These are things that you typically find with other dietary supplements. And here they go into the mechanism of action. And so very interesting stuff here. They talk about the research that they have. So I'm going to the science page. Here's what you've got here. Armra's nature's first bioactive whole food, perfected. Our founder created Armra colostrum to save her own life. That's pretty interesting. Galvanized by a catastrophic health crisis, Dr. Rahel discovered the evolutionary power of colostrum to restore the body with its original blueprint for optimal health. But she didn't just bring it to market. Dr. Rahel created the leading wholly bioavailable, research-backed bovine colostrum uniquely optimized for human health. So far, other than the first one, I think to the vast majority of consumers, like, okay, I've seen similar claims on other products. I do find this first one interesting about, how she created this to save her own life. That seems a bit extreme, and they go into more research here. But anyway, let's dive into the actual class action now that we have a bit of background on Armra. All right, so here's the actual notice. We've got a class action complaint, jury trial demanded, fun. It's Sammy Petros, as well as any other individuals that were similarly situated or effective versus Rahel Biosciences. Now, a couple things here. First of all, I'm not a lawyer. That's number one. And number two is that it's quite possible that Rahel Biosciences is innocent. We don't know that. So a lot of this stuff, is just this is just the notice. Rahel Biosciences still has to defend themselves. And, I'm not saying that they're guilty. That is not the whole point of this. This is just us reading through the class action lawsuit and just seeing what we can learn from it, right? Because we obviously want to avoid this scenario in the first place. And I think a couple of things I want you to think about when we're going through this. Number one is obviously, what were the claims that this brand made that got them into trouble, right? That's, I think, the obvious one. And the other thing that we want to think about is I want you to see how the attorneys write these types of class action lawsuits. And let's be real, their goal is to win. So they're going to put their strongest argument forward, and they're going to make you look as bad as possible. When I say you, I mean the brand. They're going to make the brand they're targeting, make them look as bad as possible. All right. And so when I read these class action lawsuits, sometimes, you read it, you're like, oh my gosh, there's an element of embellishing. There's an element of exaggeration when you think about what's already in the market, and a lot of compliant products have similar claims. But when you get these notices, they are written in a way, like I said, the lawyers put the best or the strongest foot forward, and they make the brand sound pretty bad. And that's the goal of this. And the other thing I want you to think about is, even if you were innocent, how much is this going to cost you? Not just in settling this claim, but also the lawyer lawyer fees you have to pay to settle this, right? You've got to get your lawyers, they've got to review this, they've got to talk to the judge and the plaintiff, right? All of that stuff, that takes time. So you can easily drop 5 to 6 figures just in lawyer's fees alone. And then obviously the time, the stress in class action lawsuits, there's discovery. And if you've got a lot of stuff in emails and Slack messages, that's all part of that discovery exercise. And a lot of the times, small brands are horrible when it comes to understanding the impact of discovery. And so, it's really important for us to know how to communicate within the organization to the CEO and how we handle these types of claims and determine what claims stay on the label and what don't. And, sometimes you've got employees and people just talk freely on Slack. Sometimes they're just making exaggerated statements. And sometimes the CEOs don't know any better. They're like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to do it anyway. They actually say that in emails. That's all discoverable. That can all be found through the discovery exercise. And so when you factor in all the costs, like the real costs, class action lawsuits, whether you're innocent or not, is a real pain, right? It's a huge disruption and it could hurt a lot of supplement brands and just close them up, especially if you are the smaller guys. If you are a large brand, if you are the Liver King of the world, which by the way, he's obviously doing very, very well. I believe his class action lawsuit, which I did do a video about, I believe he made that lawsuit go away by paying the attorney. It was very, very hush hush, and it was just dropped. So, they didn't say that he, paid anyone off. The lawsuit was just dropped, and we can all kind of decipher, right, what we think happened based on that. So anyway, let's go through the nature of the action now. And by the way, this notice came in on end of April of this year, so fairly recent. So let's start with the claims. Defendant uses a common fraudulent scheme that deceives consumers into believing that the products are research-backed to strengthen immunity, ignite metabolism, fortify gut health, and restore sleep. Now, those claims on the surface, strengthen immunity, ignite metabolism, fortify gut health, restore sleep, they don't seem that crazy, do they? You see a lot of these types, immune claims, metabolism, gut health, probiotics, melatonin, restore sleep. You see these all the time. And they also have this other one, research-backed, which I think is probably one of the biggest issues with this brand. We're going to dive into this more. But, between us, immunity, metabolism, gut health, these are fairly standard claims. But let's find out what is so fraudulent behind this. And if you haven't watched my other video about claims that can get you in trouble, we dive more into it. It's not enough. Essentially, what I say is that it's not enough that you use the right words. There's an element of, even though you use the right words, can you back it up with science? And that's why I think the research-backed is going to be the vulnerability here. So let's keep going. So they even go into more claims: improve mood, focus and energy, support sinus health, enhance skin radiance, activate hair growth, and fuel performance and recovery. It's a lot of claims, just generally speaking. But again, you see this a lot in the supplement space. When I see improves, like I said before, improves, enhance, boost, these are trigger words to me. And then it just comes back to, well, how good is the substantiation, right? And when we talk about substantiation, sometimes it's not enough just to find one or two papers. You got to look at the entire totality of evidence and make a determination as to, based on that whole totality of evidence. Like if you put all the experts in a room, would the general consensus be that this supplement would actually do X, Y, and Z? Or would they feel like, some experts might agree, some might not, or some might feel like more studies are needed, right? All right, so let's keep going. By using this deceitful scheme, hopefully you're enjoying this video. And really quick, if you are interested in starting a supplement brand and you want to understand how to navigate the FDA and FTC requirements of all of it, help you find a manufacturer, you can actually work with us directly. Links in the description down below. Back to the video. Defendants create a false aura of scientific and pharmaceutical legitimacy to sell the products at a premium price, violating New York law at least in two ways. First, defendants' products are not in fact research-backed, as evidenced by the deeply flawed studies that defendant relies on in making those statements. Yeah, so to that point, just read how this is written by using this deceitful scheme, right? And the other thing too is like New York, right? It's a very litigious state. You got California, the same boat. So that's something to think about in terms of where you're operating, but also where you're selling. Chances are you're going to be selling all across the US. But just know that when your product is in California or in New York, no matter where your business entity is, you are vulnerable to these types of actions because you are selling to those consumers. To make matters worse, defendants' products were never tested in any peer-reviewed clinical trial, and defendants' reference to the other clinical trials are nowhere to be found, not even on its website. Second, defendant markets the product by making an array of improper disease claims without mandated disclaimers next to its marketing statements in violation of the Food Drug Administration regulations. Now, this is interesting. So a couple of things here. So they're saying that, you should have clinical trials of the products, and we didn't find the clinical trials. If you look at the vast majority of brands on the market, they are primarily relying on the studies for the ingredients, not necessarily a clinical trial or studies on the actual product that they're marketing. The other call out here is they talk about the disease claims, right? The defendant markets the products by making an array of improper disease claims without the mandated disclaimers next to its marketing statements. Now, this one was interesting. So that disclaimer, we've all seen it before. This product has not been evaluated by the FDA, or these statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. This product is not intended to treat, cure, mitigate, or prevent a disease. That's the disclaimer it's referring to. Now, they are making it sound like, when I read this statement, as if you're allowed to make disease claims as long as you have the disclaimer. I don't think the lawyers are saying that here, but the way it's written, it sounds like that, when in fact you can't. Even if you had the disclaimer, you cannot make a disease claim. All right. And sometimes these lawyers that do this, by the way, that write these notices, they don't know the regulations. Yes, they know the laws, but they don't know the regulations. They're two very different things. And sometimes this is what happens. And anyway, it's a small point, but just something to keep in mind when you are working with lawyers versus a regulatory expert or a consultant. The realm of expertise and what they're good at are different, but they both add value, and they do look at your product from a different lens. As such, the products are considered unapproved new drugs under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, which are illegal to sell and worthless. See how they write it? Right? They really tell a story, don't they? As a result of its deceptive conduct, defendant is and continues to be unjustly enriched at the expense of its customer. Yeah, when you look at the website, for the most part, there's a lot of strong claims here. A lot of the claims that they talk about, the research-backed in particular, is definitely still on that website. I suspect that they have taken down some of the claims or removed things, but then at the same time, when you don't correct things, you go through this lawsuit and then you correct it, but you correct some of it, you're kind of admitting guilt to a certain degree. Do you know what I mean? It's that weird gray area. If you change it, you admit guilt because you're trying to defend yourself. So then you don't change it, but then if you don't change it, you're still making, you're violating things. So it's a weird situation. Obviously, you want to talk to a lawyer when handling these things. So anyway, let's talk about what they're, how much are they asking for here? So this court has subject matter jurisdiction over this action pursuant to 28 U.S.C. Because this case is a class action where the aggregate claims of all the members of the proposed class are in excess of $5 million, exclusive of interests and costs. There are 100 members of this putative class, and at least one class member is a citizen of a state different than defendant. Interesting, right? And by the way, I'm not defending Armra. Some of these lawyers here that go after these supplement brands, some of them are seeking these types of situations. Like they'll have a Twitter account. They'll ask people, if you've bought this product, reach out to us. You may, be entitled to some X dollars. They're doing stuff in the background, collect as many victims as possible. It's not like all these guys just go to a lawyer one day and then hopefully, complain enough. Maybe that is the case, but there's also lawyers that actively go out and try to find victims, if you will, so they can build a class action. And that's just how nasty this whole industry is. And that's why, as much as we want to be competitive in our claims, and compliance is very important part of that equation, especially if you want long-term success. If you want short-term success, you want to be fly by night. Yeah, one could argue that you just go nuts, make quick sales, and then get the hell out of Dodge. But if you want to build a legitimate business that can sustain long-term growth, you need that quality, you need that consistency in quality, you need that compliance in there to make sure that these things don't go after you and ruin all that hard work that you put into it and all the time and all that craziness. Anyway, so let's get into the backstory of our friend Sammy here. So plaintiff Sammy Petros is a citizen of New York, residing in New York, New York. Plaintiff purchased defendant's Immune Revival unflavored stick packs for his personal use in September of 2022. Okay, interesting. So, he's seeing claims from 2022. That's 2 years ago. So, and you see this all the time. Small startups don't know the boundaries of claims. They feel that either their studies are better, or that because no other competitors are making claims, and therefore they're allowed to make these claims, or they think that, no other brands are making these claims, and if I make these claims, then I'll be that unique product. Well, sometimes there's a reason why the other brands don't make the claims, and that's because they're not supposed to. They're not allowed, and that's why you don't see competition. And that's just the nature of it. And sometimes these small startups don't know that. They read the science. They think that the science can easily translate over to their product. Unfortunately, that's not the case here. And they make really strong claims that they start out. And then as they progress, they realize, we have to soften our language a bit more, scale back on our claims, etc. The typical progression. Ideal state is to kind of get all this stuff right at the first go. That's the goal, right? Of course, you got to make some concessions. The reality is that you are a startup. You are in a very competitive space. So you got to find a good niche. You got to find a unique value proposition. Sometimes that might mean pushing the claims where you can. All right, so let's keep going here. Plaintiff Petros saw that the product was labeled and marketed for immune revival, and that it was research-backed and purporting to, among other things, strengthens immunity, ignite metabolism, fortify gut health, restore sleep, improve mood, focus, and energy, support sinus health, enhance skin radiance, activate hair growth, and fuel performance and recovery. So it's a lot of claims, right? Plaintiff Petros also saw that the website claimed that the products function by stimulating the microbiome to help prevent viruses and bacterial infections. This is definitely a disease claim. I was looking at the website, and I don't think I came across this. So it looks like they've removed that, and I don't know if they've removed it because of this action or if they just removed it since 2022. Plaintiff Petros relied on defendant's representations when he decided to purchase the product. Plaintiff saw those representations prior to and at the time of his purchase and understood them as representations and warranties that the product's benefits were substantiated by reliable research. Yeah, so what's happening here is he's saying, look, I made that buying decision based on the information you provided. You said XYZ claim, and that's the reason why I purchased it. If you didn't have these claims, I wouldn't have purchased their product, and therefore you misled me. That's the whole argument here. That's essentially what it comes down to. Plaintiff saw those representations prior to and at the time of his purchase and understood them as representations and warranties that the product's benefits were substantiated by reliable research. Accordingly, those representations and warranties were part of the basis of his bargain, in that he would not have purchased the product on the same terms had he had known that his representations were not true, right? So there you go. Plaintiff Petros paid a substantial price premium due to defendant's false and misleading claims regarding the product's research-backed ability to provide the touted health benefits. Plaintiff Petros, however, did not receive the benefit of those bargains because the product was not, in fact, research-backed to achieve those results. In fact, Plaintiff Petros did not experience any meaningful immune or other health benefits despite using the product as directed. Had Plaintiff Petros known that defendant's representations and warranties were false, he would not have purchased the product or paid substantially less. There you go. That's the argument. I bought it on the premise of the claims of everything you told me, and now that they're not true, I paid way more than I should have for that product, or I shouldn't have bought that product at all, right? That's essentially what it comes down to. Petros did not see any disclaimer that the product's claims and representations have not been evaluated by the FDA, or that the products were not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any diseases. Is that true? I don't know. It's always on the side, right? So anyway, that's what this is all about here. Essentially, had plaintiff known that defendant's products were adulterated, misbranded, and illegal to sell under FTCA, he would not have purchased them at all. Notice the tone of how this whole thing is written. Think about that. You're a drug product. You're misbranded. You're selling an illegal product. It's interesting, right? So if we go down to the general allegations here, now they're going into the the hair growth business. They talk a little bit about colostrum. And check this out. According to its most recent Amazon listing, defendant has sold over 10,000 products in the past month alone. And the defendant touts on that same listing that it has sold 50 million scoops. Yeah, guess what? They're going to use the math of 50 million scoops and figure out per unit how much you sold. And that's going to be the basis of how much money they're going to collect from you. All right, that's how they do this. And these metrics are on Amazon, right? They do report how many units are sold per month, right? You see that when you're shopping around. This sold 254 units this month or the last week or whatever it says. So let's keep going here. And this one is the biggie here. Defendant's representation the products are research-backed is false and misleading, okay? In order to differentiate their products and gain a competitive edge, manufacturers and advertisers routinely mislead consumers by claiming the efficacy of their product is backed by science, when in fact it's not. Well, think about clinically studied, clinically proven. We see that all the time, right? Or that we use research, we're scientifically driven. And let's be real here, a lot of the times, the science in their formula, when you look at the ingredient, the dosage, the type of studies, the science sometimes is quite weak. And now they're quoting the FTC, which we reviewed in my other video about these types of claims, right? With claims that can get you in trouble. And advertisers' health-related claims about the efficacy of a product must be supported with competent and reliable scientific evidence. We talked about that last time, right? As the FTC has stated, down here at the bottom, well-controlled human clinical studies are the most reliable form of evidence, right? So they're setting the bar. The bar is FTC, and the FTC says that the bar is human clinical studies, right? Double-blind controlled trials is what we're talking about. And then they go in and say, as discussed in a recent Truth in Advertising article regarding the product, defendants claim that the products are research-backed is a hoax. So let's keep going here. Item 15, and this is really interesting. Pay attention to this. As discussed in a recent Truth in Advertising TINA article regarding the products, defendants claim that the products are research-backed is a hoax. Okay, so this is telling me that this product, Armra, was featured in an article through tina.org, and that, there's a part of me that believes that maybe this article is probably what drove this class action. And the call out for you is that you'd be surprised that there are more eyeballs on you than you think when it comes to compliance. Like, everyone's worried about FDA or FTC. Sometimes it's not those two agencies. Like I said, they're looking for the big players typically, right? Sometimes not. And that said, there are other agencies, industry organizations, other groups or industry groups, etc., and they're going to be writing about you. They're looking at you, and sometimes, I can't prove it, they are, bound to or connected somehow with these other lawyers. And as a result of the Tina article, I'm kind of speculating here, but there are dynamics in place where these types of other agencies that catch the issue are tied to the lawyers that then sue you. And they're kind of independent, but they're really not. Do you know what I mean? I've seen that in action in the past. Now, I don't know if this is what happened here, but I'm just saying you got to be careful. You got to think not just FDA or FTC. Sometimes within the network, somehow it's going to get to you. And let's take a look if, what does Tina say about Armra or colostrum? So this is from truthinadvertising.org. And they talk about cow colostrum supplements, what you need to know about what some are calling liquid gold. I didn't read through all of this, but when you look at the highlights, there are no rigorous published data yet to back up claims that the supplement can support skin regeneration, lead to weight loss, or reverse age-related changes. Oh, they do talk about Armra. Let's see here. Armra also links to a technical paper on its research page that discusses lab results that reportedly found Armra showing a promising combination of protective effects at the cellular level involving both immune cells and gut cells. Promising. In other words, not proven. Armra did not respond to tina.org request for comment. So anyway, this article must have triggered something. And then came the class action. Wouldn't be surprised if this is the funnel. So people are working in the background. They publish this article. This article brings people, people that were impacted by this. Oh, I took Armra. I don't think that's right. They reach out to Tina, and then Tina funnels it to the lawyer, and that's how they build the class action, right? They build out the 100 people. And this article came out at April 16th, 2024, and the class action came out at end of April. Interesting. Again, I don't know if they are connected. I'm just saying there are more eyeballs than you think, and sometimes the network is more connected than we realize. Okay, so going back to this, defendant relies on 4 studies which merely analyze the potential benefits of colostrum based on an overview of other studies. As such, the conclusions drawn by defendant's studies are based on inferences and conjecture rather than reliable scientific evidence. In fact, one of the defendant's studies, which examined 9 scientific studies regarding the efficacy of bovine colostrum on leaky guts, concluded that more research is needed. Defendants also links a technical paper, and it wasn't peer-reviewed and not a randomized controlled trial. So you can see here that they're picking apart the studies. So this is their research page, and here they go. They see, what are they doing? They're linking the studies on their page. And there are people that ask me about this, and they're thinking about doing this. And they're linking the actual study to their page, and they have even more, and it's in your face. And there's a fine balance of making sure that your statements are substantiated and true. And it's one thing to talk about your product and then put a little dagger or something or a reference number, and then down at the footer of your website you have the reference. That's one way of doing it. And it's another thing to slap the actual study right in your face. And I think this is the issue, because what happens now is when you make it this explicit, it actually becomes a claim. That's how FTC or FDA would see it. Now the claim, the study is the claim. And sometimes these studies aren't done well, like there's vulnerabilities in studies, because a lot of these guys that do the studies, they're researchers. They're not thinking about, branding and marketing or selling a product. They're just trying to do research. Sometimes they do studies in subjects that have diseases, right? Hair loss, asthma, skin cancer, right? Heart disease. But you can't do that. Otherwise, now, if you put this type of study in your face, the argument then becomes, that study, is studied in diseased populations. Are you implying that your product is for a drug? And, is a drug. It's for a diseased state. So I was looking at this the other night, and I noticed this, and I know some brands might be thinking about doing this. And if you are going to do this, you got to be very careful here. And typically it means you want to use a really, really good study and just make sure your claims, I always like to soften it a notch down. You know what I mean? In some cases, depending on the type of product that you have, the consumer demographic, and how big you are or how many eyeballs are on you. So right here in this part, research on patent pending Armra colostrum, and they give you the cellular research and clinical research. So when I click on cellular research, I was looking at where it takes you, and it takes you to this white paper. And it's at the cellular level. This is a test tube study or an in vitro study. All right. And you can look at what it measures, but ultimately you and I both know, hopefully you know this now. Again, like I said, if you watch any of my other videos, FTC, Quincy Biosciences, supplement claims that can get you in trouble. You know that in vitro studies aren't enough. All right. So let's go back here. Now, if I click on clinical research, it just takes you to this page, clinically backed. Okay. It talks about while over 5,000 published studies document the benefits of bovine colostrum and its ability to optimize health at all stages of life, Armra's proprietary colostrum concentrate specifically demonstrates superior efficacy in head-to-head studies. All right. Additionally, Armra colostrum offers proven health benefits validated by dual-armed third-party clinical research trials. So what's interesting here is when I clicked on this, I was waiting for the white paper. There was no white paper. It was just this page. And then they're telling you, well, we've got a third-party clinical trial. Cool. Well, where is it, right? And they show you the before and after pictures, and they give you some pretty concise numbers of what the results are. This is, in the FTC world, this is dangerous territory. All right. You got to make sure you've got really, really strong studies. And you can hop onto the website. Maybe they change things by the time you look at it. I couldn't find the actual study. They don't actually point you to it, which I think is interesting. How come? Why didn't they? And again, maybe it's confidential. So then when do you whip it out? You whip it out when someone goes after you. And maybe that's what's going to happen. So like I said, we don't know if, we're not saying that Armra is guilty here at all. We just are saying that they got this notice And this is the opportunity now for Armra to defend themselves. And maybe they have a really strong study. There's a part of me that feels like, why wouldn't you put the study here? If you're going to put the other studies on the other page, why is it not here? That's just my gut feeling, all right? So in this section, they kind of go after all the weaknesses of the studies that they presented here. Like I said, not peer reviewed, not randomized controlled trials. Separately, let's go to number 18. Defendant claims that a third-party clinical trial found that users of the products experienced powerful benefits, including less bloating, better focus and energy, thicker hair, reduction in their waist circumference, and improved their lean muscle mass, strength, and endurance. Yet that clinical trial is nowhere to be found. Furthermore, to the extent that such study exists, defendants' reports indicate that instead of using objective measurements by blinded investigators, the trial results were based on the participants' subjective self-assessments, indicating that the participants experienced less bloating, noticed better focus, reported thicker hair. It is self-evident that the alleged clinical trial was anything but a double-blind, randomized controlled trial. Interesting. Well, we'll see in court, right? Gosh, it's crazy. I just feel like they're so study-driven. Why didn't they post it, right? Why didn't they put it on their website? Other studies also support the conclusion that the key ingredients in the products, bovine colostrum, do not provide immune or gut health benefits, further bolstering defendants' representation that the products are research-backed as false and misleading. So yeah, when you are referencing a study, those studies are written by authors that don't know you, right? They were published before your brand came out, let's just say. And so a lot of the times these researchers are trying to be as truthful as they can in the way they report the findings. We did find some significant findings, although more studies are needed. That's quite common in this space. Or, we did find a significant finding, but our subjects were smaller and there could be some, discrepancies if this were to be replicated. Sometimes the studies identify their own weaknesses. And that's kind of what's happening here, and the lawyers calling them out on it. And this is why I go back. I'm like, be careful when you post the study. First of all, you want to make sure the study is very strong. That's number one. Number two is you want to go through the study with enough detail to kind of watch out for these things. And ultimately, I'm not a big fan of posting the study in your face unless it is really, really strong or it's one of your own studies. So they keep going into how there's no reliable research. We don't have to dive into that. I think you get the point. Then the defendant hits on this idea that the product is an unapproved new drug under the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, right? It's unlawful. Disease claims that suggest the products mitigate, treat, cure, or prevent diseases. And then, so what are the drug claims? Because we saw the claims earlier, right? They were sleep and recovery. And for the most part, we find that in the marketplace. So here we go. The defendant's products are drugs rather than dietary supplements for multiple reasons, including the fact that they are marketed to induce hair growth, right? So this is like curing baldness. And if you're going to cure baldness, that's what's implying, then they're positioning this as a drug. That's what the lawyers are saying, right? There are products out there that are for hair, skin, and nails. That's more about helping the body support the way it grows hair, whatever hair you do have, to make sure it looks better, thicker, that type of thing. But if you're going to say it's going to create new hair, that's a different situation, such as hair growth. Further on, in fact, defendant touts throughout its advertising that the products are physician developed to cure multiple diseases and that they are 3 times more effective than the flu vaccine at preventing flu. So this is a different claim altogether around flu prevention. So this is another disease claim, which is interesting, in addition to the hair growth. You can't do that. This is a elementary mistake. And, there's a lot of times with the clients, I'm a doctor, I see this, it works, or I'm a naturopathic doctor, or I see this in my practice, or I've got a study right here that says it prevents flu. Well, you still can't make that claim. The nature of the law says you can't have a disease claim on a supplement. So here you go. For instance, defendant prominently claims that the products are 3 times more effective than the flu vaccine at preventing flu and trigger rapid antibacterial immune defense. And they have it here. They got the 5 stars. Is this a review? What's going on here? There you go. These are clearly disease claims. And what's interesting to kind of make this look like a review. Sometimes these brands use a copywriter or a branding agency or marketing agency. And the marketing agency is oh, nobody ever does it this way. I am so clever to write it this way. Like I said, there's a reason why other brands aren't doing it. And sometimes it's a compliance reason, right? So that's something to think about too. What else? They talk about how it's been found to inhibit influenza, rotaviruses, neutralize toxins from bacteria like C. difficile, E. coli, and they keep going. I didn't see these claims on the website as of 2024. So that's like disease claims. They kind of hit on the disease complaint claim component of it. Then they go into the defendant not providing FDA mandated disclaimers. I don't know. To me, that seems like a small thing, but whatever. I'm not the lawyer, so maybe to them there's value here. And I can see it too. Like if the argument is, the information you provided to me at the time of purchase or prior to purchase, I'm making my buying decision based on that. And if I didn't have the disclaimer, or if you had the disclaimer, it may have impacted my decision. So maybe that's why they're making that argument. I can see that now. But, for the most part, consumers, it's so ubiquitous. It's everywhere. People don't really pay attention to it. They get numb to it, right, essentially. And so you do see products, that disclaimer on like the left panel or the right panel. By regulation, it's supposed to be on the same panel. That disclaimer is supposed to be on the same panel that you make the claim. So if you have a structure function claim on the front panel, technically you're supposed to have that FDA disclaimer on the front panel. Now you never see supplement brands have that disclaimer on their front panel ever. It's usually with the asterisk and the asterisk to that disclaimer is on the left panel, right? So, but technically speaking, it's supposed to be on the same panel. Now, what's funny is I'm the regulatory consultant. If I start telling everyone it's supposed to be on the front panel, what do I get pushback? But Brian, nobody else is doing it. And that's the reality I get it, right? Like, the whole vast 99% of the people of brands, maybe almost 100%, don't put it on the front panel. They don't put it on the same panel where the claim is actually made. So it's hard for me as a consultant to convince clients otherwise, but technically speaking, it's supposed to be on the same panel. And they call that out here. To meet statutory requirements, the disclaimer must be within the same field of vision as the statement itself. And let's be real, it's not in the same field of vision, other than that little asterisk. But, one could really push and say, well, the disclaimer needs to be in that same field of vision, should be on the same panel. These are some of the things where there are rules and, the industry hasn't really gone and enforced that particular rule. And there's just a general practice across the place and it almost becomes the norm. It's one of those things. But when you get a class action like this is what you get. And that's why, when a client says, hey, Brian, can I say this? You could. Everyone else is doing. I think the risk is low, but there's still a risk. That's the thing. There's still a risk. So yeah, then they go in and tell you where the disclaimer should be, or how hard it is for people to find. So this one's interesting. This one they're pointing out like, okay, this is the image on your Amazon, right? And I see the big thing. Now I got to scroll not one image, 2 images, 3 images, but the 4th image. You got to find your supplement facts. And there is the shade. They're saying that, is making it hard for the consumer. Who's going to scroll through 4 images? Who's going to look at the supplement facts, right? That's what they're going to do. That's what they're going to say. And so finally, the finished products are adulterated and illegal to sell. So if you factor it in, the disease claims, the fact that you don't have the shade disclaimer, well, your product isn't a supplement anymore. It's a drug, right? And if it's, did you get the right approvals? Oh, no, you didn't get the right approvals. Now you're misbranded, your misbranded product, your misbranded drug. Your product should get the approvals, just see how they're wording, see how they're going after you. So here they're just going through, how it meets the criteria of a class action. But ultimately, what they're asking for, here it is, demand for trial by jury. Like, how fun would that be? Like, you don't want to go to trial. Let's be real. I don't think they're going to go to trial. They'll probably settle this. It's going to be very expensive. You got to pay your lawyers to go through the settlement. Like, just because you agree to the settlement doesn't mean you're done. Now you have to formalize the settlement, which you use lawyers. You got to defend yourself prior to the settlement because, the plaintiff's going to push as hard as they can. And then if you don't want to sell it, you're going to go to trial. That itself is going to kill the brand, right? Typically, if you really go that far. So alternatively, you settle. So anyway, here you go. Hopefully this didn't scare you. That's not the goal here. But I think it's important for us to understand how these things work so then we can see how we can get ahead of it. And like I said, when it's a small startup brand, like I understand your situation is very unique. But as there's more eyeballs on you, you have to be prepared for these things. And sometimes you have to make pivots. And the goal is to make small, steady pivots as your business grows versus no pivots at all, get into a class action, or you make a strong pivot later and then you freak out your consumer base, right? They're wondering, why were claims taken off? Why is your packaging so different? Why, what did you change? Did you change the formula? What's going on? And you don't want that backlash either. So anyway, I'll leave it there. If you haven't watched any of the videos I talked about in this video about the Quincy Biosciences FTC versus Quincy Biosciences, or the claims that could get you in trouble, where we look at the FTC law, FDA interpretation of disease claims, all that fun stuff, I'll leave links in the description down below, or you can just watch all my other videos as well. All right, I'll leave it there. It was fun talking to you. I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.